Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Speaking of Jazz. It is March 31st already. Can't believe that. Time certainly flies. So, tonight I have a really special guest, and I know I keep saying this. They really are all special guests, though. Tonight I have joining me the great Bob Nixon, who is a terrific saxophonist, flutist, clarinetist, all-around good guy, and the band leader for the Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra. You know, Bob is one of those interesting characters because he's been a fixture in the Grand Rapids jazz scene for a very long time. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree in music education and jazz performance from Morehead State University. That's in Kentucky. And he plays with many of the groups around here in Grand Rapids, among them the Truth in Jazz Orchestra, the Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra, of course, and the Beer City Saxes, named, of course, for Beer City, USA. And typically, the GRJO is at Founders once monthly for a residency, and unfortunately, they haven't been able to do that because of the pandemic. But that doesn't mean that they haven't been busy, and Bob is going to tell you all about how GRJO has maintained its its flow going on and all sorts of great stuff. Lastly, I do want to mention that Bob's work in Grand Rapids and elsewhere has been recognized by the West Michigan Jazz Society, this organization, and he was named the 2018 Musician of the Year. So please join me, put your virtual hands together for Mr. Bob Nixon, wonderful saxophonist. Hey, Bob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jordan. We talked a little bit before the broadcast. I'm glad you're doing well. And I'm glad that, if I can say this up front, I'm glad that your latest project, making people aware of prejudice and abuses toward people, is going well. It's one of my pet peeves. As far as the jazz orchestra goes, Bruce Early started the band, and we're pinning a date of 1977 on it because we can't find when it really started. And Bruce ran the band up until his untimely death in 98. And Tim Franzek and I looked at each other and said, now what? This is too good of a band to let it go. So we decided to take it over, and we've been kind of co-leaders since that time. So we figured the band's been going about 44, 45 years now. And we've had a wonderful opportunity to play behind several major guests, and I won't even mention them all. When the pandemic hit, we had been at Founders Brewing for 14 years. And I thought about it, and I said, we got so many people in the band that have been doing some incredible writing. We need to try to record somehow so at least they can have an archive of their music. And I thought about it and watched some of the virtual things online where you see all the different players in the squares. And I said, it doesn't sound too bad. So I had three missions. One is to make the archive. Two was to get the guys' horns out of their cases and get them playing, because we didn't know at that time when the pandemic would be over. And and to make a CD. And they recorded the parts at home on a variety of anything from an iPhone to an H2 to some had some good recording devices, and they sent them to me. And then I went, oh no, I know I quit after 1,300 hours.
Oh, wow.
When four trumpet players send you their parts, they're not necessarily going to be lined up. So all I did was move them forward or backwards so they were semi-lined up. And then, unfortunately, we have a second drummer in the band besides Tim, of course, Eddie Eicher.
Yes, Eddie.
Eddie, wonderful. He kind of took over the project and did some of the editing, and then we did a lot of the editing. And then we sent it out to California, where the guys, a gentleman out there, put the final touches on it. And I said, okay, we got something that's going to be fun to pass out and maybe make some great coasters around the living room, And we listened to it, and I went, this sounds really good. The first step was bebop.com, which is Jim Martin original composition, and asked him permission to do that one. And that's the first one that Eddie put out as a video. And we got comments from all over the country about how good it was and good for you. And so we pursued and went on from there.
Very cool. Well, this is not the first recording that GRJO has done, though. You know, you guys have done several. This
is our fifth CD. The first CD we did was a learning curve. We did it at Founders Brewing Company before they had curtains and sound tiles. And it's entitled Jazz on Tap, appropriately for Founders Brewing. And that went pretty well. And then our wonderful singer, Edie Evans Hyde, we decided to do one with her. So we did Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra Swinging with Edie. Came Christmas time, and I said, we need to do a Christmas one. So we did some Christmas things. I did a lot of arranging for it, and people seemed to like that one. Mike Letley, an alto sax player in the band, said, why don't we do some swing tunes, like Best of the Big Bands? So our next CD was Best of the Big Bands, and you name the tunes, they're all on there, In the Mood, you know, etc. And then it came down, it's time to do an original. So that's when, appropriately with the pandemic, Behind the Mask came out. For people that want information on this, our website has been updated again by our wonderful tenor player, Greg Marsden. And you can get there by going to GRJO, Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra.com. And it leads you through, there it is. It leads us through our CDs. If you click on the first picture on the top, it'll take you to Behind the Mask and information. Under that are the two videos we currently have running on YouTube and Facebook. And then and they're full-length videos. Full tunes. The next page over. Hey, there we go. And we had the guys write some descriptions on the tunes they wrote. Those are the CDs and some samples from each one, so you can get a taste of what each one's into. And there is also a page for you to look at that I won't talk a lot about. It tells about the band, gives a little bio on the band. I want to thank Tim Franzek. He took all our writing and he redid everything and put it out. So there's a picture and a little bit about everybody in the band. And I forgot what the other one. Oh, where you can get the CDs. Of course, the most important thing. You can get the CDs by going to our website. You can also purchase any of the CDs. We have an online store. I have an online store. I own a recording company that we do a lot of the band and orchestra and jazz festivals across the state. Of course, that got wiped out with the pandemic. And I just added a link to that store at Shopify to Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra. And you can either buy the CD or you can get a digital download. And I noticed a friend of mine's name appear on a digital download for one of them. His name was Jordan. Thank you, buddy.
You're welcome. Happy to support the band.
Appreciate it. I guess my biggest thrill right now is doing this interview with you is to see that we have young musicians that are taking an interest in jazz, and like yourself, that I know that when I retire, one of the problems with the band right now is we're starting to age out. There's several of the band members that are 70 or really close to it, and to have young players like yourself that are awesome, available to step in when we're done is awesome. We know it's going to keep going and keep going.
Calling me young is really, really generous. I will say that. But here's a great young player who you might know. He has a little comment for you.
That's my buddy. Kevin's started studying with me a while back, and we've been through a lot together. That Pretty Horny is playing is my backup Selmer that I gave him to play. And he's going to be one of the next super players out there.
He sure is.
It's just, I hope he gets over. If you haven't had a chance to rub your magic wand on him a little bit, I hope you can do that too. But his playing, every time I hear him play it, it's, oh my gosh, he's just really doing it.
Pretty outstanding. Well, you got some really kind words out here about the album.
That's my son-in-law.
Ryan and Barbara are just big fans of the album. I am too. And you know what, Bob? If it's cool with you, I would love to play that video that people have been liking, bebop.com, so that our audience can kind of see what, you know, you and Eddie did with this project. I think it's really, really cool. Let's play some of that.
Good.
Yeah, so I was going to stop that after like 2 or 3 minutes. I just couldn't. I didn't have the heart to interrupt the solos because the band was doing such a great job. I couldn't do it. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry, as my students say.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I love Timmy at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Really shows to me kind of the character of Tim, but also the character that you all have imparted into the band. Every time I sit in with GRJO, it's just a ball. Everybody's having a good time and having a good time being really good. Everybody's having a good time making some music at a really high level. And Bob, something that I've heard you say a lot actually is just that the fun to you in jazz is like the freedom of expression. And I always hear that. I always hear that from you. It's always this thing where I think you're just having a good time playing the horn.
Yes, we are. As I watch that, I just really appreciate. I love these guys in the band. They're all good friends. Half the band have at one time or another been out with the major big bands. The bass trombone player Paul Keene,
yeah,
was Buddy Rich's bass trombone player in '69. He directed Holiday on Ice for 12 years, and I can go all the way through the band like that.
Absolutely.
That we show up and do a rehearsal, and it's kind of a community project. Sometimes too community at times, but we get it done. I was just amazed that we could do this from home and line it up with the technology of today.
Absolutely. And honestly, when you've got obviously everybody in the band is a great musician, but when you have people who can really really line up the sound and line up the video and get the website going, it really really is a testament to the fact that you said the band was formed in the 70s, but there is no shortage of keeping up with the times. I think about a lot of groups that were formed at that time, and sometimes I think you have a resistance to change, but not this one.
That's a little bit true. We've had some discussions, especially about where to play on the beat. We're all kind of old school, where if you play a bassy chart or something similar, you have a tendency to want to really sit back on the backside of the beat, which is fine. But if you keep doing that and don't keep the space between the beats the same, it slows down and drags. And the jazz of today seems you want to be more on the front edge of it. And that's been kind of a learning curve. That's why I did so much of the editing I did. The way they did this at home, by the way, is I took the parts through a music writing program. I used Sibelius, and I made an audio rhythm part and a couple lead parts and said, just get us all playing at the same speed, play along with this, and just do your part. And I want to tell you, that is a very eye-opening experience to be sitting in your living room or wherever you're recording and playing along with a track like that and trying to make it swing and try and, do all the things you do when you're used to having people on either side of you supporting you. But the guys did it.
Well, and it is a testament, to the kinds of musicians that you have in the group. I think, to me, when I look at a great band, it's the people in the band that make it special. And, when you've got people like Jim Hayward, like Gary McCurdy, like Dr. Jim Sawyer, like Tim Franzik, it's the people in the group that make it really special. And I have to say, like, when I play with Tim, for example, great drummer. But if I mess up, he's not the kind of guy who's going to get all over you. He's just not. And I've messed up on the bandstand with Tim, and the thing that Tim does is he smiles, laughs it off, and I used to apologize for mistakes that I made on the bandstand with Tim, and he says, no, don't do that. He said he would say something to the effect of, don't worry, I've made more mistakes than you'll make in your life. And so I just, Tim is just a really great guy, and I think the band is full of people like that. You know, Matt Sumner, Dave Wells, Tom Lockwood, the wonderful Steve Talaga. Over and over and over again, you just hear that there are some really, really special people in the group, and I think that's one of the things that makes the group so special.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's the biggest thing. If somebody would ask me what's the one thing I appreciate about the band the most, besides their musicianship and professional, is there's no egos. We just don't have egos. I try to, when we were doing the Founders, I would take a spreadsheet and I'd put the songs we were going to do and divide the solos up so everybody got some solos. And if somebody ended up with 5 solos and somebody didn't have any, that was all right. You know, very rarely that happened, but they're just really good musicians. I love the way Dave Wells plays lead trumpet. I think my most improved player, if I could pick one right now, would be Matt Sumner. Matt Sumner is a great trumpet player, but boy, he's been playing lead for Truth and Jazz and ending things with G's and A's above high C, and his soloing is just taken off. And if you listen to the one track, Pantaluna, that was his original chart based on his teacher at Central, Rob Smith.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course.
You based it on Autumn Lee solo that Robbie played.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Yeah. That's a great chart. I remember playing that with you all as well. And, you know, but you've got some really special writers in the band. You know, Doc Brewer.
Yep.
Wonderful Paul Brewer. Yeah, to contribute some charts and you know, his wife, Dr. Robin Connell, as well, you know, contributing some great music to the band. And to me, that I think is what makes the band sound unique, because you have people like Robin and Paul who have played with the group for years, and they know the musicians in there. It's that Ellingtonian thing, you know, of like writing music for who's actually playing, and so, you know, for example, Paul's chart, Bob the Bopper. I mean. It doesn't get more obvious than that, you know. And I think when you hear the music, it's like, oh yeah, this was written for this band. This was written for this group. Steve Talaga's charts, you know, Eavesdropping.
Yes.
Same thing. When you have, you know, a great group of writers who not only write quality music, but they write for the band. That's just something really, really special.
Well, thanks, Jordan. I appreciate that. I'm going to give a little plug out to Jim Martin, if I can. Jim Martin is a phenomenal trombone and piano player in the area. He studied a composition and arranging from Frank Mantooth. And Jim has a website. It's PDF Jazz Music, where he's got dozens of composers now that he lists on there, and he actually has tracks where you can listen to a chart, and if you want to buy a big band arrangement like bebop.com, $20, and you can get the audio of a professional band doing it and get all the parts for your band to play. And he just put all our originals up. He's putting it currently up right now. Thank you. And I know a lot of these writers, and they're very good. Roger Pompion used to live in Grand Rapids. He's now down in Florida. Good friend. I played some gigs with him a while back. He gives arranging lessons. He has a couple free charts you can get if you want for the band. But I called Jim up and I said, our project right now is I'm putting our whole library up in our Google Drive so we don't lose any more parts. And I said, we're playing so much of your music. Would you help me? On his free time, he has gone into his archives and sent me chart after chart after chart, scores and PDFs so we can upload them and have them ready to go. And when you have people like that, you know you got great friends.
Absolutely. And, you know, it really does take a whole community. You know, it
Yes,
takes a
yes.
whole village. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and a testament to the group, and a testament, you know, to you, that people are just, and Jim especially, you know, was willing to go in there and do that. I think that's an incredible thing. And when I hear when I hear the band play, and when I hear charts like Jim has written, it's just there's a certain level of finesse to it, and certainly like a certain level of commitment that takes commitment, you know, from the players, but also commitment from, again, writers like you've got. So that's so cool. Now I wanna take it back a little bit, because
Okay.
yeah, because you know, how did you get started playing saxophone? And I know you're a really accomplished woodwind player, but was saxophone your first instrument? How did you get started?
Honestly, my first instrument was piano. And I took 9 years of classical piano. My father, I had found out by watching over in the local park band doing the concert band things. He would get out a tenor sax every now and then and go over and play. And then I found out later that in the Navy, he played with several people and played with Alvina Ray and some others. Didn't even show me how to put a reed on the mouthpiece. He just says, I wanted to play drums, and he said no. And I wanted to play trumpet, and he says, too loud. I said, how about saxophone? And he says, you can have my saxophone. So I started that way in junior high, but I wasn't serious at all. My junior in high school, toward the end, my high school band director came up and said, look, you need to practice. You got some talent. And I said, what do I got to do? And he says, come in after school and I'll show you. And he showed me how to read the old stock charts for dance bands. And I actually played my first professional job in May of my junior year. The guys drove over and picked me up at the house and drove me over to Connersville, Indiana. And every time I got lost in the music, they pointed on the music and showed me where I was. And I tell you, I don't think I've ever had a better time than that. And I got home and they handed me money. And I said, wow, this is what I want to do. I made more money. People are going to laugh when I say I made $17, but that's more than my best friend made on his paper route. And he had 150 customers for 2 weeks. And I said, it's like going bowling and getting paid. So I started. And my senior year, I played every Friday and Saturday with bands. And we played with a band that, matter of fact, we had Les Brown's band come in and play. And we were kind of the warm-up band for him. Old society band, 10-piece band. I was by far the youngest guy. The next youngest guy was probably 70. But what they taught me. And I went on to school and ended up leaving school for a little bit, went on the road and came back. And matter of fact, my jazz instructor was from Indiana University, Chris Gallagher. And he came and taught theory and taught the jazz band and helped me do transcriptions. And then after I graduated, I went on the road with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra and got a call when I was in Toronto to come back as a graduate assistant. And came back and spent 2 years doing that and never been the same. I have actually been on stage with more than 500 artists.
Wow.
Major concerts. Started with a lot of the Motown things, but then, you know, Lou Rawls and Dionne Warwick and all that. And it was just, what a trip.
Yeah. Like bowling and getting paid. I love that. Now, I have to say, Bob, it's interesting because you mentioned how much of an impact, you know, these teachers had in your life when you were there. You were saying, all right, you know, they're pointing to the music when you would get lost. And, but you know, I mean, you've had so many successful students. I mean, you have had some really, really great students come through your, you know, private saxophone instruction. And, you know, we think about like a student like Kevin Brewster, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin's a great kid. He's a great player. And can you talk about the role that teaching plays in your career? And you know, because a guy like you is, you know, going on the road with Tommy Dorsey and all these other, like you said, playing with 500 artists. But, you know, you can teach too, which is pretty evident from a kid like Kevin. So talk about the role of teaching in your career.
Well, I want to preface this with, I don't think I've had a situation in the music field where it was a competition. Yeah, we would play solos and see who played the best in that, but it was always, hey, try this, try this, try this. And all my life it was that way. With Kevin, when I first started teaching, I taught school in Cincinnati. And out of that first year I taught, I had 4 of my orchestra students go on. One's playing with Detroit right now. I had a flute player, piccolo player that played with the Boston Pops. I've had several students go on and do that. I don't know if I can take credit for that, but I sure enjoyed watching them grow. During privately, I've had many, many students, and I just love on them. I try to show them some tricks of the trade. I try to show them some of the resources out there they can use. I was a big proponent of smart music for playing big band charts with professionals and transcribing. iReal Pro, they have some backing things. Now the internet has so many things that students can do. When I started playing, we had to buy a record player and put the record on and listen to 4 measures and try to figure it out. Now you can slow things down in real time, or you can go to Saxpedia or several of the other resources and find some of the solos. Don't play them that way. Get it from the artist, but it helps shorten the process to successful playing. My freshman year, I went to school in Tennessee because, as I said, my grades were, I told you earlier, I had a reading disability and my grades were really bad. And I had an English teacher that signed me up for a reading class that showed me how to read. After that, my grade point average went from a 2.0 up to about a 3.9 because I couldn't understand what I was reading. So I transferred up to Moorhead, and Moorhead at the time had a great jazz faculty sextet. And the saxophone teacher, who was phenomenal, did not want to do gigs. So as basically a sophomore, I was playing with the faculty every Friday and Saturday. The drummers I think he taught at North Texas, was the head of the drum program and composition at North Texas State. Several great players. And again, if I made a mistake or got lost in the changes, they would say, okay, there it is, and point and keep you on. I couldn't have asked for a better situation for myself. Matter of fact, it was Chris Gallagher that I mentioned earlier that got me into the Motown. Lined me up with the guys. Larry Wiseman and the guys over in Naptown, and got me going.
Well, and then it's just clear to me that when you say you love on your students, you've done that for them. And I actually want to point you towards something that you said to me that I remembered. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I met Bob at one of the first gigs that I was playing when I was a sophomore or freshman in high school. And it was a gig it was this private party for a dentist's office. And I noticed that there was a band next door, and I thought it was so cool. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like people do this. This is cool. Like people actually, like, this is a career. It's a living. And, as I was talking to you, I think you were on a set break. You said, okay, so there's this thing. It's called the Real Book. You can get it. And it has all these tunes in it that you can learn and that you can play on these gigs. But then you said, don't buy it in E flat. Do not buy it in the alto key. And I said, okay. He said, and then you said, learn to sight transpose. Learn to transpose on sight. And I have to say, I have been doing that ever since when I read. And it's gotten me out of so many jams because I can sight transpose from lots of stuff. Like, if I'll be playing a church gig, I can sight transpose from the hymnal or other gigs when somebody brings me. Sometimes people bring me lead sheets in concert pitch and, they don't bring me lead sheets in my key. And I say, hey, that's fine. I can just read this. And it's because Bob Nixon told, I don't know, what age are you in freshman in high school? Like 13, 14, 14, 15 or so year old me, don't buy the real book, cool, but don't you dare buy it in E flat. And I always point to that story, Bob. I do. Because people ask me, like, why would you, like, why are you so unfazed by this? And I say it's because older musicians have helped me along the way and said, hey, do this. This will make you better. This will help you to, fall in love with this craft like I have.
Well, you sure have fallen in love with it. I love your playing.
Thank you.
I tell all my students the same thing. Some of them fight a little bit. It's a little hard at first. Listening is the big thing too. Transcribing solos. That's one of the reasons there are programs now that will slow down music in real time because of digital, where you can actually transcribe a Charlie Parker solo. I wouldn't start there. I started with Sonny Stitt's Cool Blues. I want to tell you the headache that gave me. But I did it.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? When you say, you had to go buy a record player and get all these records, for me, for my generation, it was CDs. And so when CDs were like just becoming the cool thing to have, I'd get this, I had this stereo, and I just well, this really doesn't exist for CDs, but I wore those things down. I went to the local library and I just checked out all the jazz CDs because that's what I wanted to learn. And I, just listened to them on repeat. When I could drive, I had this this case of a bunch of CDs. And so listening, I think, for how easy it is for students today to get music at their fingertips. So easy. YouTube, it's all over the place. And yet I find myself saying listening is so important. It's almost like they take it for granted. We had to go, our generations with our different mediums, of course, but we had to go get it. And so you had to really want it, right? Like you had you had to really want to get that CD. And when you think about how, students today, and I see so many great students out there who are doing the work, but they have it so easy. They can just go get the they don't even have to get records. They don't have to get albums anymore. And there are of course other challenges, but it's so cool that when they take our advice, and go and get these albums and listen to them, they can do it on YouTube. They can do, and I make myself sound like ancient history when I say that is such a cool thing, but I do think it is cool because, like you said, it was some effort for us.
Yes, it was.
But, I think about it and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I really wouldn't.
I couldn't see doing it any different. I really couldn't. And again, back to the jazz orchestra, one of the things I appreciate the most is they'll play basically any style as long as it's good music. So if I bring in Basie's I Can't Stop Loving You, I mean, they'll play it and play it well.
Well, then you got people like Steve Talaga bringing things in like Fanfare for the Uncommon Man.
I wrote that for him.
Or you wrote that for him. That's right. Yeah. But that was a different style too. And then, you think Under the Northern Cross. That is a Steve Talaga. I know that. His Road to Harad, you've got so many different styles. You're absolutely right. As long as it's good music, the band's all over it.
Steve has written so much good music. We could do a full CD just of his music. And it would be a variety of styles and textures, and such a great writer.
I was just going to say that it would be, you might expect one writer, just expect it to be like this certain thing. And it's not the thing with Steve. I think the same thing about Doc's writing, about Doc Brewer's writing, just really different, very different kinds of tunes. And to me, I think that there are a lot of great writers out there who are like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
One of my, well, I shouldn't mind. One of the unsung heroes in our band right now hasn't been playing with the band a little bit. Joel Clammer. Joel has written 4 or 5 really, really good big band. He just happens to be smart right now. He's got 5 children at home, and he says, "I'm going to be a dad and be at home." And I said, "Smart move." My oldest daughter is 42, and it just went by that fast. So family's
important.
Yeah.
And, you know, Joel's charts, I always like their titles. He's got like that, like Snow Day, right? Or Ultimate Frisbee Golf is one of his, I think.
Mm-hmm.
He's got some fun ones in there. So with a musician like you, who has been a lot of places, played a lot of gigs, who do you find yourself listening to these days?
You. I'm trying to keep up with the new things. Fortunately, my students bring in things. I had a student that graduated from Oberlin a few years ago on a full scholarship. Colin McCahill went over there. Another great player.
Good guy.
And I'm not sure. No, it was another one from Kentwood that turned me on to Snarky Puppy. And I went, until I listened to it, and I went, "Oh my gosh, that's great!" So I'm a big fan. I try to model my sound. I had a friend of mine, an old timer, that said, "You remind me a lot of Bud Shank, your sound and playing." And I went, "Thanks." I like to know when I'm playing tenor. Somebody would tell me, "You sound like Stan Getz," and I said, "I'm trying to do that." I guess my major influence is I'm in love with Phil Woods. I've met him several times.
Who's not?
I've been to his house and took a lesson from him when I was playing up in New Jersey. And he was the one that said, I walked in, he says, "You play piano?" I said, "Yeah, a little bit." He said, "Sit down and play for me." And I went, uh-oh. Yeah, I didn't play changes very well. So I played a classical thing for him. He says, "Now learn jazz. It'll free you up." But Phil Woods, Cannibal, of course, a lot of the major mainstream players. I'm going to miss some. I've been listening to a lot of them on, what's this, Carlos, I always say his name, Carlos Margatti. Do you know, are you hip to him? He has a website where he's transcribed a lot of solos, and you'll see Sonny Rollins playing whatever, and his transcribed solos on the screen, but it's him playing it. So you can play right along with him. He's a Spanish guy. I found him by accident.
Yeah, that's cool. Always good to have accidental finds like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice. Very cool. Well, yeah, Snarky Puppy is great. And, I think that when you have players like Louis Armstrong, and of course nobody can say, all right, Louis did nothing bad for the trumpet, but he played kind of the same way until he died, right? That was his style, that was his thing, But I always really have to say that it's amazing to see, when somebody, I think about like Mary Lou Williams, for example. Mary Lou was just doing so much different stuff until the day she died. And to me, like that, I think when you are constantly listening like that, it kind of keeps you young. Kind of keeps like at least your ears young.
Yes.
Like your ears for the music young.
Absolutely. I had another story I was going to tell you, but I can't remember it. So. But I appreciate this time. You're probably aware of the fact that I just left being a judge. I was a state jazz and band judge for 30 years. And met a lot of kids that way and shared a lot of the same stories with them about what to do. My big thing was, what was your homework for today? They'd look at me, "You don't have homework in band." I said, "Well, you better show up to my rehearsal knowing all the notes." and knowing the style. You don't learn that in rehearsal. And the jazz orchestra, I tell them the same thing. Don't practice on this time. And they don't. They come in ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really, really amazing sentiment, because you do have groups, and we've all sat in those rehearsals, right? Where it's like you listen to like such and such a trumpet player like practicing his parts and his or her parts, and it's like, you know, practicing on the rest of the band's time. It's just not the best way to utilize the time. And so it's really interesting, you know, to hear about that. And I have to give one more shout out to Mark Wells, who's in the GRJO, and he's just a great guy and a great trombone player, and just, you know, the things that guy can do with tech are just out of this world. Mark Wells is just it. I mean, he does great things with the trombone too, but and for a while he was releasing some of these videos on the Acapella app, just doing some really, really cool arrangements that he was. I don't know if he was creating those spontaneously or what he was doing, but it was really, really fun. All right, everybody, our time is waning, but I want to remind you all that Speaking of Jazz is presented free of charge by the West Michigan Jazz Society. And I also want to remind you to go to grjo.com and pick up the Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra's new CD. Now, you can get the physical copy, or you can get the digital download of their new album, Behind the Mask. I'd encourage you all to do that, because you know what? Great local music is great music, okay? And I'm just going to remind you all of the website. It's grjo.com. Go hit up those YouTube videos. Listen to the YouTube videos. Look at Behind the Mask. I mean, for heaven's sakes, you can buy all their other CDs too. But there are so many great, so many wonderful tunes on this record. Bob the Bopper and Wiggleworm and Feijoada. Snow Day, like I said, Under the Northern Cross, Europa, Fanfare for an Uncommon Man. That's the one I was thinking of. Indeed, written by our guest Bob Nixon, Morning Star by Bob Taylor, and Pontaluna by Matt Sumner, as well as Eavesdropping by Steve Talaga. It's just a great CD, and you know what? I'm going to come right out and say that because I've listened to it, and and you all heard just a hint of it with Bebop.com by Jim Martin. And I have to say, it's just a great record of some wonderful writing, and it shows that people are staying creative during this pandemic time. So I want to thank my guest again, Bob Nixon. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everything you're doing with GRJO. I'm looking forward to the next Founders gig, coming and hearing you all, and just being in that location again. It's been a really special place for live music, and I have no doubt that it will continue to do so.
Thank you, Jordan.
You're welcome. All right, good night, everybody. Have a great day.